Ghost Wars Secrets from the Writer's Room panel. You all can cozy up a little bit more if you'd like. Get a little closer, turn off your cell phones, etc.
I don't want to get closer.
This panel is brought to you by the Writers Guild of Canada. The Writers Guild of Canada represents over 2,000 professional screenwriters across the country, including myself and most of the panelists here on our lovely panel. If you're interested in what we do, you can check us out at www.wgc.ca. You can find out a lot of interesting information there, including a little bit more about all our panelists and a little bit more about the show. And I do want to shamelessly plug an event next Saturday, November 18th. There's a series we have called The Writers Talking TV. So next Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Van City Theatre on Seymour, there will be a one-on-one conversation with Brian Wright. He's the creator and showrunner of Stargate Atlantis and the current hit series Travelers that's on the air right now. It's free. You just have to come on out, so I invite everyone to come. But back to Fan Expo. I would like to introduce our panel, and specifically I'll introduce the moderator for the day, the terrifyingly talented showrunner of hit series like Bitten, Daegan Fryklind.
Hello. Oh, this isn't going to quite reach. Oh, there we go. Oh, water. Thank you.
There's more coming.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, welcome. This is Ghost Wars, Secrets of the Writer's Room, aka Where They Bury the Bodies. Now, one thing about Ghost Wars, apparently, Ghost Wars is not airing in Canada yet. So, we can talk a little bit about the show, the writers of the show, but you probably have not seen it yet.
Yay!
But legally. For our purposes, that's okay, because today we want to talk about writing and what it means to be a writer on a series in Canada. How do you get in? What does it look like when you get in? How do you not get fired? How do you move from show to show? What's it like to be a TV writer in Vancouver? All of these various things. So let me just ask to our audience, how many of you are writers or hoping to become writers? Nice. To which we say, Google gobble, one of us. And one other thing I want to point out about this panel today, we don't have a showrunner on the panel today. The showrunners of the series, there are two, right? Simon Barry and Dennis Heaton aren't here. But this is great for you, people who are interested in being on a panel like this someday and being in a writer's room, because our panelists come from various, they've all taken various paths to get here today. They all are representative of various levels in the hierarchy of the writer's room. So you'll get the full experience today of what a writer's room looks like, what the different roles are in the writer's room and on TV series, what their credits are, so that when you watch a show and you see producer, executive producer, supervising producer, a lot of those people are writers, and they can explain that to you today. Also, showrunners, they sometimes like to talk a lot on a panel. They don't leave a lot of room for other people. How do I know? Because I was one, and I won't shut the fuck up, will I? So, without further ado, I will introduce, and they'll introduce themselves, but first, Rachel Langer, Ghost Wars. Give us your origin story, Rachel.
Okay. I grew up in Edmonton, where there's no TV writing happening at all, and moved out here about 10 years ago with my husband, who's over there, and begged Simon Barry to be in one of his writers' rooms, and he let me on to Continuum, to his peril, and I went to the Canadian Film Centre, and here I am, continuing to write in Vancouver. I moved back because Toronto's not the center of the universe. Woo! What? And yeah, making a go of it here with these fine folks.
So, can you just give us a little bit more about the Canadian Film Centre and what that is?
Yeah, the Canadian Film Centre is an organization founded by Norman Jewison, and they do a whole variety of programs for producers, directors, feature writers, and TV writers, editors, all of that good stuff. So I did a residency program called the Prime Time Television Program, where they bring in a showrunner who runs a mock room for a project. Orphan Black was developed through that primetime program, and they run a room and you develop your own series.
We have water.
Thank you.
Like 10. All the water, all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, this one
Thanks.
is. There it is.
I feel like an imposter because I went to law school and I was a producer before I started writing and directing. I've been in the industry for some years. Was it 20 years, I think, or so, and I started as a producer, and I got my training basically for actually writing and directing through the NSI, which is the National Screen Institute, and I did Women in the Director's Chair as well. And I guess my reason for living is I'm a horror writer and director, so that's all I do, which is horror. If they're not dying, I'm not doing it. So that's pretty much how it goes. I had no desire actually to be a TV writer, but my agent was actually, she was an agent for a lot of the writers who were in the Van Helsing room, and she thought this would be a great opportunity for me to actually see what a writer's room would be like, since I had shows that I was developing with Bell Media. So I interviewed and accidentally got the spot, and Simon was the co-showrunner on it with Neil LaBute, and so I was on Van Helsing as a story editor. I didn't have any scripts, and then when Simon had Ghost Wars, he invited me back, so I'm grateful, because I guess I didn't completely blow my Van Helsing experience, but yeah, so that's where I am now.
Cool. Damon, Vignale.
Hi. My journey to the writing room, like most of you, I wanted to write a screenplay, read a lot of books, read a lot of scripts, and just started writing. And somewhere along the way, I decided I wanted to make a film. So with a couple of friends, we raised a little money, and we made a feature film. That sucked. It was a comedy. My brother said to me after he watched it, maybe you should put a laugh track on it. It wasn't too bad. But it did give me the experience of making a film, and I went on to make a couple more. And spent a lot of time in the indie film scene, doing festivals, that sort of thing. And while I wasn't making films, I was working as an AD in commercials. And that was over about a decade. And then a funny thing happened. A producer that I worked with on my very first film, the one that sucked, he had a series in development with APTN called Black Soul. And Ron Scott's his name. He always liked my writing, and he invited me to come aboard that show as a producer and writer. And I spent 5 seasons there, and it was really, that's how I entered into television.
And Gemma Holdway.
Hey guys, so I started in journalism, and I lived in the UK for a couple of years, and I became disillusioned by my career path, so I went into screenwriting because that seemed like a logical move. I actually went to Vancouver Film School right here, and did the writing program, and from that I managed to get into script coordinating, which is a really great way to get into writing in a writer's room. And I was a script coordinator on this show as well as a story editor, and yeah, I'm happy to talk more about script coordinating and what that is and how that can be a way to get into writing.
A lot of writers' rooms in Canada, we can't afford a writer's assistant or showrunner's assistant, but we definitely need the script coordinator. And that is somebody who keeps track of all the changes. They work with the assistant directors to make sure that everybody's got the right version of the script. They're in the writer's room. They take all the notes for when we're breaking episodes. They're an incredibly vital part of all writers' rooms. Depending on the showrunner, benevolent showrunners, of which there are many in this country, the script coordinator is also involved in the breaking, can contribute ideas, because we all appreciate a writer's room where best idea wins rather than ego is driving the room. And I'm assuming based on the knowledge of your two showrunners, that's how your room ran. But maybe you guys can talk a little bit about, first of all, just give me a rundown of what your credit was on the show. So story coordinator?
Script coordinator and story editor.
Story editor?
Co-EP.
I think I'm a story editor.
Story
I
editor?
think so, yeah.
Consulting producer.
Consulting producer. So you see they're all writers. They have different titles on the show. Some of the other ones that you'll see are an executive producer, that's, you know, the showrunner, sometimes executive producers who are senior level writers as well. Story editor, there's a sort of break between story editor and what will be a producing credit, and that means when you're story editor and script coordinator, you're in the room and you're helping to break. As soon as you become a producer, oftentimes you produce your own episode that you're writing as well, and these guys can talk about that. So in terms of your writer's room, maybe talk a little bit about what were the materials that you were given prior to coming into the room, how much of the show was sort of built before you came into the room, and then what did it look like being in that room. And because Ghost Wars it's a combination of a serialized show, meaning like there's a big arc over the season, but there are also these sort of individual cases of the week. Is that right? Yeah.
It was an interesting genesis on this one because Simon had done a development room with Dennis and John Walker, who's on Van Helsing, and they broke a pilot and then rebroke the pilot and then rebroke the pilot. And so actually usually you would get pitch materials and maybe a Bible of a show, which is kind of like the document that outlines where you want to go and all the characters and what you're going to do. And we only got a pilot. That's the only thing that was actually written by the time that we convened. So I think we were all on Christmas break. I think I got the pilot on like Christmas Eve or just before, and we were all like, cool, we have time to read this and open presents. It's gonna be great. So we all read it over Christmas, and we started January 9th. We came into the room and just had a pilot that we'd all noted up and kind of went from there. So it was a lot less materials than you would normally get on, at least in my experience.
And Simon was Simon, the showrunner. He was very open to everybody contributing their thoughts on the pilot, open to changing things. It wasn't really until that time where everyone was together and we started talking about the world, the themes we wanted to explore, the characters. Together as a room, we started all those discussions and really breaking out what the season would look like. And the further we got into that, the more it kind of changed some things in the initial pilot.
And so in terms of that first breaking room, were you looking at the larger arc for the series, and then maybe just walk us through how you broke the season?
I think the very first thing, which was kind of fun, we got together and Simon just wanted everyone to talk about the horror films that inspired them, or the ones they liked, and what it is they liked about them. So for me, I grew up, with The Thing, loved Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all those 70s films. And the thing that I like about horror is dread. So, and we just went around the table and we talked about what we each like in horror films, and how he was really encouraging us to bring that into the show, so there was always an element of something that we were getting out of each episode as well. We were writing things that we really wanted to write. So that was the first step.
Yeah, and we did a big arcing board of like each episode. So we had 13 episodes, and we just kind of put on some, benchmarks of what we knew we wanted to see happen. They all got moved around, but it was just kind of like, this has to happen, or this has to happen. And Simon's big on boards. Like, he literally brings these like 7 feet cork boards in, and we had like 17 of them in the room, and we just tack our cards up. So we did a character board that had all the characters that were main people in their episodes and where they were going to go. And so like the first month felt like it was a lot about that, and then starting to get into breaking some of the rough episode sketches and ideas.
And so how long was your breaking room?
We did 10 weeks split up over 2 sections. So we did 6 weeks, and then we went away for a 3-week hiatus, and then we came back for 4 weeks, but then, and so that was the end of the breaking room, and then we continued to break and deal with things as we were going through prep and production.
In those 6 weeks, the goal was to break enough episodes so that when we went away for those 3 weeks, every writer was writing a script.
Right.
And so that's what happened. We were off 3 weeks, but we were all writing at that time. So then when we came back to the room, we read each other's scripts and we note them before we start to break the next episodes.
And we just found out that Better Call Saul has like a 7-month breaking room, so we're all a little bit salty about that.
So, we'll define breaking for you. This is when you have, you're just cracking open the stories, really. So you'll crack it open for the season. What does the season look like? What's the beginning of the season? Where your character is going to be at the end? Kind of rough ballpark, because those things are going to shift. And then also when you cast, and then you see who you have in your cast, sometimes those things shift as well. And then for every episode, you're going to break your episode too. And depending on your network, depending on your commercial breaks, I'm working right now with CW, and they have 6 acts. You were with Sci-Fi. They are...
We had a tease and 5, yeah.
Tease and 5, yeah. For CW, it's just 6 acts of whatever. So those, then you sort of, you have an understanding of your story and how you want to carve that story out across those 6 acts, ramping up to your commercial breaks so that you have exciting moments at the end of commercial breaks, because everything that we do is manipulation and manipulating you to stay on that channel and not change the channel to go on to the next one.
One of the things that I think, like in genre that we do that maybe doesn't happen in the rest of things, is that we actually spend a certain amount of time also breaking what our creature is. And so in this case, we were looking at ghosts. So it was defining in our world the rules that the ghosts will actually behave in. So when you've got a supernatural world that you're dealing with, it's not like you're doing, I guess, ER or something more dramatic, which is a real world. So on Van Helsing, we spent a lot of time discussing what we wanted the vampires to do and what we didn't want the vampires to do. So there's a lot of that sort of research that goes into it as well. And I am not a psychic medium myself. Our main character is, but I have a lot of friends, and that's my world. So we spent a lot of times even discussing what were our main character Roman's gifts. What could he do? What wouldn't he be able to do? So that's a big component of what we had to keep going back on.
Yeah, we changed our ghost rules like 97 times before we solidified them, but
Yeah.
we got them locked in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's true. The mythology of a genre show is super important because, as you know, as genre fans, you can smell a rat when the mythology doesn't line up. Like, it's really to lock that down. And what are the rules of this universe, and how do they differ from other ghost shows?
Yeah.
And was that a discussion too? Of what other ghost shows are out there, and what their rules are, and how you guys could be similar, how you could be different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was actually a huge component of what we like. I think in the first few weeks we were breaking down and saying what we wanted overall in the series, but also where we wanted to be. And Simon had his specifics. Like his touchstones were like The Exorcist and The Shining, and really classic sort of 70s, 80s films of that period. He loves John Carpenter. You know, there's things that Simon loves, and so for all of us, it's sort of like watching what he likes and kind of also bolstering that with some of the things that we might prefer. So totally.
Yeah, from day one, it was always about subverting the tropes, and that was a big priority for Simon, for sure.
And so, what sort of tropes were you looking at subverting?
Well, we talked a lot about like...
Without too many spoilers for people who haven't seen the show.
We talked a lot about like the difference between a jump scare versus dread, as Damon was talking about, and we also talked about how genre is a really important way to talk about things that are going on in the world right now, and to not just kind of be as bald about that as maybe you could be. So, you know, we really wanted to make sure that it came with character first, and that we gave all of our characters an equal viewpoint that they didn't always agree. So instead of kind of going this good versus evil route of this is a bad guy and this is a good guy. The ghosts are the bad guys. So our people are all just different and layered, and they don't agree. So I think those were some of the tropes that we tried hard to not just fall into this black and white. We were like, let's exist in the gray and let's keep it kind of this, you know, creepiness over this, like, you know, jump scare kind of slaughterhouse thing.
It occurs to me now that for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with Ghost Wars, maybe one of you would like to give just a little, like, 1 or 2 sentences about what the show is about. Is about.
The log line.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So Simon always pitched it as a small town in Alaska with a big ghost problem. And our town is Port Moore. It is for sure a character in the show. It's a small island, fictional, in Alaska. And you've got a lot of big personalities there. And basically, what happens is there's an earthquake in our pilot episode, and death's door closes. And from here on, anyone who dies turns into a very angry, evil ghost that is hell-bent on making our heroes' lives very difficult. That's our show.
Yeah.
And there's one road out of Portmore which goes over a bridge, and the bridge is destroyed, so it really becomes isolated. Cell towers are down, so it really just becomes its own, removed from the rest of society as they fight the ghost war.
Yeah, we were very particular about getting rid of cell phones ASAP in the series.
And Gemma mentioned it's, you know, big characters in the show. One of our, Vincent D'Onofrio, plays a priest. We have a character who's a part of a research facility. We have a psychic son who has psychic abilities also. He's sort of the hero of our show. And so it allowed us to go into religion, science, the paranormal, and explore all these things as well as we were talking about death and ghost hauntings.
Yeah, it is nice to have that balance between religion, spiritual, scientific, like to have that represented.
Yeah, and we had people within our room kind of who kept those viewpoints. You know, we had people who've grown up in very, I mean, I'm a pastor's kid, so I was like the religion girl, which was interesting. And, you know, we have people who believe in ghosts and people who don't, and it was great because we had all those viewpoints that we could discuss openly without, and see some of the viewpoints that our characters would have and kind of how they might disagree and how that might look.
Well, maybe talk a little bit then, Rachel, about what it is to be a writer in a writer's room and sort of family that is built and the level of how candid.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing that you can possibly have is a writer's room where everybody feels safe to share their own experiences, because the show is really just based on our collective experiences and the experiences of those in our lives. And I think we've all probably been in both kinds of writer's rooms where we felt safe to just blurt it all out, lay it all on the table. I certainly felt that way in Ghost Wars, and other rooms where you felt a little less open. But Simon runs a room, and so does Dennis. They both run a room that is very welcoming of different perspectives, and you know, it's always about the idea that fits best for the show, not the person who's saying it. That said, they built a room of collective experience that was very different, which was great. And I think we all felt like we could connect in our love for genre, but we all came from very different points of view and very different writing experiences and had very different skills within the room. So we really lucked out in Ghost Wars having a room that felt so cohesive. But I think these guys know more about me than I would have told my family. So that's, you know, if you can get to that point, you know you have a room that's working.
A lot of times it's conversation. So you'll just be talking about a situation, and inevitably, because you're working with creativity, which tends to open you up, you draw on your personal experience and you start sharing stories. And so there's a lot of that happens in the room where writers just start talking about their personal experience. And it's great for other writers because it's you know, you jump off of each other. Oh yeah, you know, this happened to me, and inevitably this hive mind starts to happen, and somewhere out of it, all of a sudden, the story idea takes birth. It's pretty exciting to be involved with when the room's really great.
To me, I describe it as like a D&D like adventure, and you're basically needing like you need a little of everyone. So you know, there's your dwarf, there's your there's your cleric, and I think I like to think I'm an elf, but I'm wrong on that. But anyway, so everyone has their thing that they're bringing to the table, so that I think with the rest of the room, like a lot of you guys came from like drama and from that sort of background, whereas because I come from the horror side of things, usually like working with a group of other writers means that you actually have to like, and coming from the independent side, it's like, ooh, it's working with a group of other writers. So it's like a 10-week committee meeting that's sort of like therapy and committee at the same time. So that's with a lot of food. So you wear stretchy pants by the time you're done. So it's it's true. So
Yes, the writer's room and snacks. The true marriage. When I'm at family reunions, I often, when family finds out what I do, they will ask, so do you write the action or the dialogue? We write it all. So maybe, Damon, would you like to talk about when a script goes through the process, and once it's done, broken, what happens to that script at that point?
So, breaking an episode is usually putting cards up on a wall. And the cards give a little information about each scene. And you'll have your teaser. In the case of Ghost Wars, we had a teaser and 5 acts. And so we have all these cards up that we've broken an episode together. And at the end, we get to a point where it's like, you can read the cards to your showrunner, and it's like, okay, we have an episode there. So from that, we turn it into an outline. So who's ever script it is, they will take those cards, usually a photo of it on your iPhone. You go home and you start writing the scenes. You won't write dialogue, you'll just write the action. And you just tell the story. You tell the story through all the scenes of the episode. And that would work, that usually turns out to about 15 to 20 pages. And that comes back to the room, and everybody in the room reads it, and everybody notes it, and you sit around the table, and the other writers tell you what they like, tell you what they don't like. It's all done with love. And the idea is, you elevate the material, and you take the notes. And the showrunner generally speaks into which direction he likes you going, which one, or she, and which direction you're not, that sort of thing. And then it's from that, it also goes to the producers, and it also goes to the broadcaster. So you're getting you take the room notes, you address your outline, then it goes to the producers, then it goes to the broadcaster. Their notes come back. You decide which ones you want to address and which ones you don't, per the showrunner, and that's when you go to your first draft script at that point.
Yes.
Without dialogue, just the action.
Yeah, it's basically just like a short story of this happens, then this happens, then this happens, so that somebody who's reading it can just flip through and see what the plot and the emotional arcs are. It's really important to identify what your characters are going through emotionally in each episode too, because that, for the viewer, is why you come to this show versus that show, is that you're bonding with the characters. One of the other things that it is an incredible juggling act that television writers do, because not only are they building story, but as they're building story, they're keeping in mind the budget of the show and the production realities. So Karen, with producer hat on, do you want to talk to us about, as you guys are building story, some of the production concerns that you're keeping in mind at the same time?
Things that cost a lot are, do you really need, there's obviously location things cost a lot, but sometimes we actually have to rewrite scripts because all of a sudden you have way too many characters in this episode. So you're juggling that sort of thing, or some of your cast is more expensive than other cast, and it's always balancing, and you do that you have to have that in mind. Like you write to your ideal, but then ultimately there'll be your producers will come in and basically read you the riot act as far as like, oh, that giant crowd scene, does it have to are you really wanting that giant explosion? Do you need these sorts of things? And you start cutting things down. And hopefully, I look at it not as a barrier or a limitation, but actually a kind of a challenge. I like working in the low budget, that's why I love doing horror. Actually, it's like I actually see it as a chance to do something more interesting than what your first instinct would have been, which is again to write that giant explosion in the mall with all the shoppers, right? Like that's not going to happen. So.
But you can see too, like even when you're watching a series like Game of Thrones, you can see the episodes where they're saving money to pay for the big.
Yeah, usually, like in a 10 episode season, you pretty much count on episodes 7 and 8. We're not gonna have as much going on because they definitely want to finish strong, right? Like 8, 9, and 10, they want you coming back next season. So these things actually do happen in the course. In the middle of the season, they start thinking about the finale, and they're budgeting it and how do we save money, and you start to see it in the later episodes of the season that they do.
What is it? The bottle episode where it's in one location. So those 3 people are now trapped in one location. You know that was a budget save.
And those are usually your 3 main casts on the show that you own. Like you have contracts on certain cast members that they can be on the show every day. They get a per episode rate. And you guys shot here.
Yeah.
In Squamish.
Yeah, we shot in Langley, Squamish, and Britannia Beach, which is where that big mining museum is, and we shot outside of that mining museum, which is really cool. And our studio was downtown, so we had all of our sound stages in a building downtown.
And so maybe explain the difference between, first of all, how many days on your scripts in production consideration? We have this thing called in days and out days, and that means on sets versus out in the world.
I mean, I think they tried to keep it around 9 and what were we doing? 13-day blocks. So we block shot, so we did 2 episodes at a time. So we had 13 days to shoot 2 episodes, which is pretty tight. Normally you'd prefer a little bit more cushion than that. Yeah. And I think what they were trying to do was keep us in the studio 8 and 9 days, and then out of the studio, 4 or 5 days. And they kind of tried to group those together. So you would do all your studio days at once. But we had the fortune of shooting all of our episodes out of order due to our cast availability. So normally you'd shoot 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4. So we shot 1 and 2, 6. No, 1. We shot 1.
They're really happy about that.
Yeah, they're super.
What?
1. So 1 was its own block. 2 and 3, 6 and 7, 8 and 4, 5 and 10, and 9 and 11, 12 and 13. So our mythology in terms of consistency was all over the place. So we would be in the bar one day shooting in episode 5, and then they'd be like, next scene's episode 10. So they'd rip all the decorations off and change everything around and throw a bunch of stuff on the floor or whatever it was that we needed to do to change it up for so it was really tough for our crew to keep things, and they relied on us, and we relied on Gemma mostly to keep it all straight. But
and how did that impact your writer's room then? Because generally in a writer's room, you write the episodes chronologically, and you can go back and what I call backspackling. If something happens in episode 6 and you haven't shot 8 yet, you can go back into the episode 8 script and be like, furiously fix that thing down the road. So with Ghost Force,
we had 7 ready before production, so which is a lot. You wouldn't normally get the luxury of that. So we had 7 scripts written that we did write kind of all at the same time, but in order. And then we actually did write the rest in order as well, but we just knew what the dates were for those blocks that they had to be done by, and so all the ones before that had to be done by then as well.
Right. So in addition to production concerns of, can you afford the explosion, can you afford the crowd scene, then it's also balancing what you're setting on your standing sets versus what you can put outside. And so what kind of sets were you guys working with?
We had a bar And
Clearly our favorite.
Yeah, writers making a bar?
What?
the bar is actually the best at it.
It is.
It's really cool. I love it. I absolutely love it. We also had the church interior. We had the church basement. We have a morgue.
We have a science facility called Lambda, which we like have a fake particle accelerator in, so like a huge, it's really cool. And so there's a bunch of labs and offices and medical facilities in there, which is all kind of one giant set. Yeah, and we have an interior of a boat because nobody wants to shoot on the water for that long. And then we built an apartment as well.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's ABC. Those are the things that you avoid as a writer: animals, boats, and children.
And we put all of those.
Yeah, we used all of, we had
Oh.
ferrets and kids
Yeah.
Those are the three things that are going to follow in your day. Animals,
You,
boats, and
well,
children.
you can't do a ghost story without creepy kids, right?
The
Yeah.
kids are creepy
Creepy
anyway.
kids have to be in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so shot the show in Vancouver. You guys are all based in Vancouver. There is such a huge pull in this country as a TV writer east. How is it being a TV writer in Vancouver?
I feel like we're really lucky to be able to work here. I know that there's a lot less opportunity here. That said, as you're starting out, I mean, I'll just speak to my experience as a writer who moved back from Toronto after school. There's a lot less, opportunity, but there's a lot less competition. So there's probably like 20 me's in Toronto at my level who I'd be competing with for jobs. Here, there's a few, and
There's just you.
well, that's nice. The spawn of Satan. But yeah, I mean, I think we kind of consider ourselves the cowboys of Canadian television because we've all chosen to live here, and everybody thinks we're crazy because it's really hard here, but it's also great. I mean, and once you kind of get into the community here, you know most of it because there's 10 of us. And you get more calls, and the stuff that does come through here, you'll know about it faster. And there is more that's happening lately. We went through a really dry patch for a while, and there's been more recently. So, I think it's a chicken and egg thing. The more writers who choose to stay here, the more we can staff rooms. The more we staff rooms, the more writers will choose to stay here. So we're just planting our feet for now.
You guys?
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver, is my preference. That's, I'm always feel grateful when I'm on a show in Vancouver. That being said, I mentioned Blackstone. Those 5 seasons were in Edmonton. I worked a couple of seasons, 19.2, that's Montreal. So, yeah, I feel just really lucky to be working as a writer in television. So if there's a job across the country and I'm not working here, I'm gonna go.
Totally.
But my preference would be Vancouver. When I create a show, I write for Vancouver. So yeah.
I haven't had to work anywhere else, but I actually haven't done any Canadian. Like none of my broadcasters have been Canadian. So both Van Helsing and Ghost Wars were sci-fi, and I also was the series director on a investigation discovery like true crime series, and that was the U.S. investigation. Like that's the Murder Channel. So as far as for me, I have some family obligations as well, so I try not to go anywhere, but it's not because I'm a shut-in with weird cats, which I kind of am. I don't actually I don't want to work in Toronto. I'm allergic to the place, so.
I'm from Ontario originally, but I've been here for... but I've been here for 5 years. I'll say, it's hard. It's really hard. And I tell my agent, if the work comes my way, I'm willing to go anywhere. So I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. But for now, I'm here and working. And we'll see what the future brings.
Yeah, I think the majority of Canadian writers have a go bag. There have been cases where I've been staffed on a show on Thursday and need to be across the country for a room that opens on Monday with my dog and everything. And that's a reality that we face, but it's work, you know, and we love it. And I have no other marketable skills. So
Yeah.
I don't know what else I would do. Before we throw it open to questions, anything else you guys want to impart about Ghost Wars, writing, how you got in, anything else? Words of advice.
Words of advice.
If you want to write, just, I mean, it sounds obvious, but, you know, keep writing. Like, don't write that one script and, you know, just when you finish one, start another, because you know, I mean, you don't really start to, or you know the craft until you've written a few scripts. And I always tell people to make a film. I know Gemma here has a short film she's making. Karen's working on a doc drama. I know Rachel's always working on short films with her husband. Making films open doors for me, so, you know, write a short film. If you can't direct, get a director. Just somehow be creating some work that you can put out there and show and have credits with.
And to Damon's point about having your scripts ready and just writing, I mean, you never know when the opportunity is going to come, but when it does, you won't be able to say, oh, sure, I'll have that edited in a week for you. Like when I got onto Continuum, I had been turned down for another job, and I was like, oh, I just need something. And I had interviewed Simon, so I emailed him a year later and was like, hey, like, I'll make coffee, I will get lunches, I just need to be in a room so that I can prove that I can be in a room. And he said, great, can you start in 3 days? And I was like, yep, I can do that. So, but like, they wanted to read my samples and they needed my stuff, so there was no time to get it ready. And I was lucky that I had 2 scripts ready to go to be read, because once that door opens, it opens really fast, you know? So you just, it's a combination of writing and relationships, and they are hand in hand. It's not separate from each other.
And when you guys were read along the way, were the showrunners looking at scripts from series that you had been on before, or were they looking at original samples? Which means it's their own idea, it came from them, wasn't somebody else's show.
My experience is always original.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
never ask for a script of the show I've written on. They want to know what I've written myself. And if I had a show, what would it be? It's always original material.
they'll read a spec of another show if you have that, but almost always they would take an original over that if you have one.
I think and for me, because I'm a filmmaker, there's always the script plus the finished version of what I've done. So you can always see how it translated and how it worked, and that, so that really helps. And my advice would, again, is once you're in this, it's not like just whatever you do, you're checking your ego. You can't be precious about the script, you're not precious about your ideas, you're not precious about anything, you're part of a team. And actually what I find in television compared to my own independent like features and shorts even, is that if anything, you're part of this giant collaborative team. So the scripts don't feel precious to me. They feel like working documents where we've all collaborated on, because we all broke the episodes. So even when you get assigned your episode, it's yours, but it isn't yours. It's everyone's. So when you get the feedback, it has nothing to do with what you did. It has everything to do with like, how do we make this better? So it's always about, again, serving the bigger good and the series, and not you.
And another cliche, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, as I said, I spent 10 years AD commercials. And I chose commercials specifically because they'd only be 5 or 6 day shoots. I could make some money, and then for the rest of the month I could write my own stuff. So, I mean, you're either really committed and that's what you want to do and you're going to do everything to make that happen, and there's a lot of people who are that committed, so you have to like really commit yourself and be in for the long haul.
Cool. Why don't we open it up to questions? Do we have a floating microphone or
Like the aisle mic.
Oh, there's aisle mic. Come on up, sir.
Come on up.
I there's more irregular breaks mid-season. You know, you'll have some of your series will go off for a few weeks and then come back. When writing, do you have any idea of what sort of breaks there's going to be? Do you know if people are going to be coming back from they just had a new episode the last week, or it seems to really affect some series more than others?
I think that's more of a U.S. Situation than in Canada. Well, they'll take a show. They say that the show is going down for a couple of weeks so that the writers can catch up. In Canada, a lot of times, and in the U.S., the show is airing at the same time that they are writing it, and that's why sometimes the show gets ahead of itself and they need to stop production to let it catch up. In Canada, we don't have that luxury. Our budgets are really tight, and it's like, we're slicing pennies to make it happen. And so a lot of times the series that we shoot here are done by the time they air. Like the show is wrapped, and or it's in late post-production, like in the sound edit and everything. But does that help? Anyone else?
I haven't been on one in Canada that's had a mid-season break. We've had like a Christmas break, but that's pretty standard. But I think because our orders are often so short, we don't always have them. They just kind of power it through. And they're also like, air it before someone cancels it. So, yeah.
All right, more questions. Oh, can we move a microphone? I'll do it. Oh, thanks, David.
Just had a question in regards to when I went to film school, generally they would say write to the genre in terms of where you're going to whatever you're interpreting. But a question in regards to having original material. Let's say you guys are on board. Let's say it's like the idea or the content with writing stuff that people are interested in. Would you be open to say other genres, sci-fi or western or any of those different things, just to get a sense of as to person writing? Because at the end of the day, it's really about the story and how you can connect with the
Like in terms of reading somebody's sample, you mean?
That's right.
Yeah.
So say for example, you guys are a lot of this, or let's say somebody has some other idea, but it's just sounding a different thing, different would you guys consider that?
I mean, I don't have a horror sample, so I think we've always, in Canada, you can't afford to just be one thing. So I've always been told by showrunners who are reading me, I want to read the best piece of writing you have, even if it's not going to be the genre that we're going to do, because it will give me a sense of your voice. And that's mostly what they're excited to hear, is what your voice is, what you're interested in, and what you do well. And they can glean that from, in my case, I have a drama sample. They can glean that from my drama sample. And even if it's not genre, they might ask me, like, how do you feel about genre in an interview? But they'll read what my best piece of work is usually.
If you're passionate about something, we can feel it on the page. So whatever the thing is that you're passionate about, be it Western, genre, whatever, write to your strength. And that is the thing that will help you get into a room.
Thanks very much.
Yes.
Okay, Phil Donahue.
What kind of notes did you guys do on that first pilot, and what from that pilot made it into first episode?
Our scientists were originally in the pilot, and we decided pretty early on that we wanted to take them out. I think it was because we were spoiling what caused the earthquake too soon, so we decided to delay on that and really focus on that small town and those rich characters and who they were and what kind of secrets they had.
Yeah.
So you want to say something?
Well, no. I think we also had an interesting situation with the pilot because it had been approved by the broadcaster before we came on. So we did all give our notes, and some of them even Simon was like, yep, I hear you, but some of this has been approved. So we had a certain things that were guaranteed to go forward. We did a lot of like fine tuning of our characters though, and like Gemma said, the scientist came out. I think a lot of the order of the plot that happened got shifted around because we felt like reveals were happening at times that weren't working, or we wanted to hold them over. But the core of what was in there stayed the same. It was all the details that we sort of noted and changed around.
I have a question, a dum to Heather's question. How much changed after you cast the show to fine tune to your cast members?
Vincent's character changed the most, probably, because it was such a benchmark character for the show, and we didn't know who we were going to get. And so once we knew it was Vincent, we're like, and what he loved about the character, and he had some great ideas, and he's a very generous actor who wants to be able to bring his best self to the part. So Simon had some calls with him, and Dennis talked to him, and they said, okay, here are the things that we want to bring out. So that was the character that changed the most due to casting.
I think Meatloaf did too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
We had written Meatloaf as the town bully, and he is that in the show. But it became evident, we were writing him like a 35-year-old man bully, and not that we assumed he'd be 35, but it became apparent that there were certain things physically that we were kind of pushing the boundaries on. So we kind of changed the dynamic of his bullying, and gave him some guys who would be with him, who would carry out some of his duties, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.
Has there been a point in your career where you felt like you screwed up and you're like, this is it, I'm over, I'm done? And what was that, and how did it not impact your career?
That's how I ended up writing and directing. One year, all of my projects as a producer blew up. So everything that I'd been working on for 5 years and developing just completely kiboshed. It was like a giant sinkhole. And I thought, I could sell real estate or go back into law. That literally was what I was thinking. And then I wrote a short script, and I ended up getting into the NSI Drama Prize, and that shifted everything. And I ended up writing and directing, so.
I think I feel that way after every first week in a room, because I'm like, I know I said something that people are like smiling at me and they're like, that jerk, But yeah, I've also written scripts that I wrote a pilot a couple of years back, and I'm like, this is my new original, and I send it out to some friends, and they're like, oh, honey, no, that's not, no. And I was like, really? And it was the first one I'd written in a while, and I thought, oh crap, I lost it. It's over. It's gone. It's never gone. It's just, you're just tired. You got more in there, so.
I'll say, we're all human. We all question whether our stuff is good, and you bring it into the room, and the writers are going to read it, and and I see it in the showrunners too. Dennis Eaton will bring the script and go, okay, this is a piece of shit. And you're constantly. I don't want to call it so much a judgment, because the room is really there to support you, and a good room does. But you gotta show your game, right? And so I don't know. For me, I'm always constantly going, oh fuck, did I fuck this up?
Every time I hand in a script, I think I'm going to be fired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first week on the show, like Rachel, I had a lot of anxiety. I came home every day and was just like unloading on my partner. And it was just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to be found out, and they're just going to know that I'm terrible, and I should just cut me loose. So
It's the imposter syndrome that we all have.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you so much. We'll be up here if you want to come up